Today, we'll be exploring two reincarnation stories. Mandy Richards. 2-year-old Mandy came from Llandudno in Wales, and one day the family went on a long drive to Norfolk in southeast England to visit her auntie. Her auntie lived in Harleston in Norfolk, and the family had never before visited the area. As the family arrived in Harleston, Mandy became extremely excited and pointed to an old broken down shack with a black tarmac roof. Then Mandy exclaimed, "Look, Mummy, that's where the old man made all the rings. I used to watch him through the window around the back." Her mother, Sybil, then asked her daughter, "When did this happen? Because we have never been to this town before." She then said to her daughter, "Are you sure you're not thinking about something you saw in one of your picture books?" "No, Mummy, it was a real man, and I used to watch him through the window, and he was a funny old man with a hammer. I saw him when I lived before, and I used to look at him through the back window." It was at this stage that her father had started to listen to what his daughter was saying and asked, "Mandy, how could you have lived before?" She then said to her father, "Oh, I have lived before and I remember it. I lived near here and I used to play around the hut with my sister." Then Mandy continued, "I had a sister called Sarah who was a few years older than me, but unfortunately she could remember her sister's name but not her own name. Mandy said that when she played around the hut with her sister, she would lift her up so she could see through the window. Mandy also added that the lower part of the window was cloudy and she couldn't see through it, so her sister Sarah would lift her up to enable her to see through the top part that was clear. She said that when she looked through the window, the old man just ignored her and carried on working. She described the man as having grey hair with a big bushy moustache, and he wore thin-rimmed glasses with very small glasses on them which sat at the end of his nose, and he used to look down through the small glasses at the work he was doing at the workbench. Her mother then asked Mandy what else she remembers as she looked through the window. She said that the old man would bang wildly at pieces of silver with an odd-shaped hammer, and said that there were also other women working with him in the shack, and they all did something to the rings. One lady's job was to place the rings in boxes and then wrap them up in brown paper. On another occasion, when they were visiting the area, Mother asked her husband to stop the car as she wanted to look inside the shack to see if her daughter was telling the truth or whether it was just her wild imagination. They both then got out of the car and walked to the back of the old shack, and there definitely was a window just as her daughter had described. The window had old frosted glass at the bottom and clear glass at the top. Again, it was exactly as her daughter had described. The window was protected by rusty iron bars. As Sybil peered through the window, she could see old junk, along with cobwebs and dust. Her parents were so intrigued at what their daughter had described that they decided to do further research and check out some old records at the local census office in Norwich. They were able to trace some records back to the year 1868 and found that a silversmith had once operated just outside Harleston and documented houses and huts that were close to the railway line. They found that the name of this silversmith was a man called Mr. Michael Mothersole, who operated a business from a place very close to where the road crossed by the railway line next to an old iron bridge. What amazed Mandy's parents was that the location of the silversmith was in the exact location to where their daughter had first described seeing the old man working. Was this absolute proof that their daughter had once lived a life as a young girl sometime in the 1860s in Harleston, a place she had never ever been to in this life? Simon Brown. The following story took place in Australia. It is about a young boy called Simon Brown. As soon as Simon could talk and hold a conversation, he said to his mother Susan, "I've been here before and was on a big boat with sails and lots of ropes, and I fell into the water. I died when I fell into the water." Susan then asked her son to tell her more about his other life. Simon said there was a fierce storm and he fell overboard, along with his dogs always with him. Simon then went on to describe the boat in more detail, where it had huge sails, 3 masts and hundreds of ropes. The boat was steered by a huge wheel with spokes all around it. He then went into more detail about his drowning and calmly described how everything went black when he went under the waves and was very quiet. After a period of time, he suddenly woke up and his dog was at his side. They were in a very bright place, but he said he was very tired and went back to sleep again. After that moment, he did not remember anything else until he was born again and saw Susan and Greg as his new mummy and daddy. On one occasion, Simon accidentally knocked over a jar of freshly made jam, where it crashed to the floor and broke. He then looked sheepishly at his mother and said, "I hope I don't have to do haze now." When I was a sailor, I hated doing haze, but on occasions I had to do it. His mother asked him what he meant by haze. Simon replied, "It happened if you were naughty, where you had to scrub all the decks as well as other work." Susan then mentioned Simon's story to her husband Greg, and the incident had almost been forgotten until one night they had a friend over to dinner called Peter Rawlings. Peter had once been a merchant seaman who had emigrated to Australia many years before. Peter had never met their son Simon. Over dinner, the conversation eventually came around to talking about ships and the sea, so Greg took the opportunity to ask his friend whether he'd ever heard of the word haze. Peter replied, "Of course I have, and every sailor has heard the word haze. It's extra work given on board a ship as punishment." Later on, Simon would describe to his parents the places that he'd visited when he was a sailor and gave vivid mental descriptions of landing on an island with lots of trees, flowers and fruit. He described the landscape as being lush and the weather was very hot. Simon was asked whether he had met the people on the island, and he replied, "Lots and lots. The people didn't wear many clothes, and they were very colourful with lots of beads." He was asked whether he spoke to the people, and he said, "Well, they tried to talk to us, but we couldn't understand each other, so we did not know what we were saying. He spoke funny and gave us gifts." How could a young boy at such a young age, they could not yet read or write, describe in vivid detail a life it once lived as a sailor that had possibly lived sometime in the 18th or 19th century, judging by his description of the sailing ship that he once sailed on and drowned in that life?